Hello, it's Pauline back again from PQW. This is our third lesson in our Woven Heart project. I hope you've been enjoying the lesson so far. I hope you've been following along and making up some brilliant woven hearts, or maybe you decided to do circles or rectangles or placemats or whatever, but hopefully you're learning a lot from that. When we finished the last lesson, I was suggesting for you to get your paper heart pattern, put it on your woven heart that you've done, trace around the outside edge, then stitch on that line and cut it back to about a 1/16 of an 1/18 of an inch, like I've done with this one here. It's a different colourway, but you can see where I very closely, before I cut the heart shape out, I drew the line and I stitched around, all the way around. And then I've trimmed it back, so I've just got this little bit of seam allowance here. You don't need too much. If you have too big of a seam allowance, it's going to be too bulky when we put some bias over the top here to cover this raw edge, like we have down here on the hearts that we've been weaving through the project, through the lesson. So you can see that I've put a double bias around here. I've used the 5/8 to do the green and the 3/8 Sasher tool to do the purple. And I've just switched them over, the colours over, to give a bit of difference. So this is where we're up to. We're going to put it onto our background square. Then I'm going to show you how to make the bias. We're going to put the, I'm going to show you how I attach the bias on, and then how I stitch it, the foot I use and what I do at the sewing machine. Once we get that done, the last part of the lesson is going to be joining two blocks together in my back-to-back Quilt As You Go technique. So lots to learn in this lesson. And, you know, I'd love to see photos. If you're going to make something up like this, please put some photos on our social media, you know, on our Instagram or on our Facebook page, or send us a photo on our website. And we can then share it out with everybody else, because it's really lovely to see what everybody's making, particularly when they do these classes virtually. I never see what people make, so I would really love to see them. So here we have our background square all quilted up. Now we need to find the centre, so just roughly get yourself a centre point so that you can kind of centre your heart. And we're just going to put this down and just line it all up. Like I'm using this little grid here to pop this top part of my heart, that little dip of the heart, into there, and then this point of the heart is coming where this grid intersects. So that just makes it easy. Like I may have a little bit of more fabric on one side to the other. You may want to move it over and centre it more, but then that puts this grid off. It doesn't look as nice. I like to centre it. And then when I trim this block back, I may be taking more off this side than what I'll take off this side. But I always make sure that I've got enough fabric here that I am going to be able to square this off nice and even. Then I'll measure this, and I've got 1.25 inches there, so then I'd come over and trim this one back, so I've got 1.25 inches from there. But we'll discuss that after we get the bias on. You might like to turn the block around and see if it's better this way, which, yeah, it is. So there you go. So just by switching that around, I can probably position this a little bit better so that I get it more even on each side. So you just play with your blocks till you see which way it's going to work best. But, you know, really, if we had started out with a square first, this grid should have been even, but all sorts of things happen when you stitch. It can pull in, it can distort, you might have stitched a little bit crooked. You just find where you want to position that heart to get it looking right on your grid. And there we go, we're ready to put it on. So I'll now just reposition it the way I want it. That looks fine to me. So now what we're going to do, we're going to use the Roxanne glue basted, the lovely glue that I love to use. This is water-based glue. We've used it in the previous couple of lessons. So we're going to use that. We're just going to fold this back over in half. It's nice and even. Then we're just going to put some little dots of glue all the way around this outside edge. Just tiny little dots. Then put some up through the middle, and then randomly just a few more dots here and there. Looks like it's got the measles, doesn't it? Then we're going to turn this over. If you're happy with where it's all positioned, you can get your hot iron and you can give it a bit of a press. You can let that glue dry naturally, but it's probably going to take you half an hour or so. So I usually just pick up the iron and give it a nice little press. Now we'll flip back, because we don't want it to move as we put the bias around the outside edge, and particularly when we stitch the bias down. You could pin, but I find pinning it distorts because we've got a little bit of thickness there. So I find the glue is the best thing to use for this. And knowing that it washes out when you wash your project for the first time is really nice. Okay, so now we'll press this side. Now the next thing we're going to do is do our bias. Now I'm not going to cut the bias for you in this lesson. What I'm going to recommend to you that you use what I always use and what I designed up for the bias is the bias Sasher ruler. Now I'm just going to pull this bit of dark fabric over so you can see this properly. Now you'll see that this has got a lot of 45-degree angles on it coming both ways. I found that I was always having trouble with my bias sitting really flat around tight curves, particularly when we come around curves like we're going to put around the heart. And I found if I was 1 or 2 threads off the true bias, my bias wouldn't sit nicely around those tight curves. So by having this ruler here, we've got a 45-degree angle on this edge and this edge. All of our other rulers mainly only have one 45-degree angle on them. So if I put this 45-degree angle here and this 45-degree angle here, I know that is the true bias. I was a person that just used to fold my fabric in half and I'd cut what I thought was on the bias. I got myself into a lot of messes doing that. So since we've been using this ruler, every time, no matter how tight my curves are that I want to put bias around, goes round brilliantly. What I would like you to do is go to my YouTube channel and watch the lesson on using the bias Sasher ruler, because there's quite a lot of information there for you on how to use this ruler properly. So that's just my little recommendation for this. So now I'm going to, as I said previous, I'm going to use the 5/8 and the 3/8 inch Sasher tool to make my bias, because I want it to be really nice and straight to be able to come around these edges nicely. I just love to have this little, what we call a little peeper or a little flange sitting around the outside edge. These 2 edges are not stitched down, so there's only 2 rows of stitching, so it's very quick and easy to do. But you can appreciate why we've got to have this on the bias, because it's got those curves. So to do the 5/8, as we've said in the previous parts of this lesson, you cut your fabric double the measurement of what's on the tool. I'm going to use the black. I've got my strips already cut. You can see they're on the bias. Now, a lot of people don't understand what the bias is. And for a beginner, that's totally understandable. But if I didn't cut the fabric on the bias, it won't sit around those curves. So that's why we need it on the bias. And that's where that video that I referred you to will help you cut this properly. So once again, we fold in and in, then we're going to press the first couple of inches. That's just going to allow us to get it into the tool nice and accurate. Make sure your iron's nice and hot. Then we're going to have the folded edge facing up to us. We're going to put it up and back down through like we normally do. We're going to use that double fork pin. Don't forget we use that because we want equal tension on both sides of that fabric. Now, don't stretch this because this is on the bias, okay? And if you're going to pull it really hard, you're going to stretch it. It'll stretch it out of shape. So just gentle fingers. Let your fingers help you fold. Let's turn this board on a bit of a side so we can see it better. And then you're just going to go all the way down. Now, I'm running out of board space here, but on your big ironing board, you'll probably be able to iron a bit further. But if you find your fabric's moving around too much, 8 or 10 inches if it's moving too much. Otherwise, go as far as you can without repinning. Make sure your iron's very hot. You don't want the fabric to pop open. You want it to be well controlled. Like, you'll get used to moving this very fast along here, but that won't get enough heat. If you're doing it like that, make sure you rub the iron back over it to get plenty of heat into that to keep the fold. You've got to get that nice crease all the way down the side. So you can see how it's coming out absolutely perfect down here for us. Move the pin. Like, you do this with your fingers, but it's really nearly impossible to keep it all straight and even. And also, you'd be burning your fingers all the way. This way I'm not burning my fingers at all. There's no heat going near my fingers. Oops. Just back. Some people like to starch their fabric. I don't like to starch my fabric. I find I don't need to. But if you've got an uncontrollable fabric, you may want to starch it. All right, so there's our first strip made. That we're now going to put that around the edge of our heart. So now I like to start down the bottom, and as you've seen with this one here, I've angled it off, and I've put these two outside hearts. This one here, I've put it on a bit of an angle, facing in. Done the same with the one on this side, but this one in the middle I've just put straight. So depending what you want here happening, but this is where you're going to start gluing your bias down underneath here. So we'll just lay that back down. Now grab your glue again, and we're just going to put little dots of glue onto the heart, just right around that stitching line. And I only go halfway. Then we're just going to start this, and I like to button off the end, and then we're just going to start here, leave a little bit of a hangover there, and we're going to press as we go. So you'll have to maneuver this around as you go. I'll keep turning it so you can see what I'm doing here. Oops, got a little bit of glue on there, so I'll just wipe it off. Just keep coming around. See how it's sitting around that curve beautifully for me? If it wasn't on the true bias, I'd be fighting here getting around this corner. Just take your time. Like, I'd normally get a damp, get rid of that bit of glue. I'll do that when I've finished here. Right, now this is a little tricky part that I want to show you how to get it into this dip and back out again. So we're going to use the tapered tailor's awl and our glue, and we're just going to put a little bit of glue down, straight down here. Then we're going to use the awl, and we're going to fold this back onto itself to create a mitre. And I'm going to press. And you can see the benefit of the glue. A little bit of a pucker there. Bit of that. But if I had to pin that and then stitch around there, it really would be very tricky. So I'll just get that nice and even. Fold it back. A bit more glue. All the way around. So this glue is just like tacking it in there, and I'm just going to run it out onto the angle. Just finger pressing it a little bit there just to get the glue to hold it. Then I'll come back and we'll glue around those corners. So you notice I'm not stretching it, I'm easing it around the corner. Never stretch bias around a corner. You won't get a nice result. And like, it's so easy and enjoyable to do. You notice a lot of people use fusible web underneath their bias, but I don't like to do that because I find if I made a mistake and I've got that pre-cut fusible web on the back of my bias, if I made a mistake anywhere around here, I can't pull it back unless I've got a big mess there. So that's why I use the glue. I just find it gives me a better result. But, you know, it's up to you. Use whatever you would like. Now what I'm going to do, because you'll notice this edge is not anchored down, so I'm just going to come back with my glue and I'm just going to run a little line of glue underneath where it's not stuck. That'll just help me when I'm sewing. Now, a lot of people ask the question, will this glue stick to my needle when I'm sewing? No, it doesn't. Whether you're hand stitching or machine stitching, the glue does not pick up on your needle, which is lovely. A lot of glues will, you know, gunk up your needle, and it's so hard to use once it gets glugged up with glue. Just keep running that under there. Then we'll go back and give it another press. Like pressing is the best thing to get everything really neat, to get it to sit there nicely. And now you can see I've got a little margin here and a lot bigger over here, so this is where I'd square it back to be, you know, so it sits in the centre of the block. And I've got a little bit here that's not anchored down. Everything else seems absolutely spot on. So now we're going to now put a 3/8. You know, you could leave it just like that if you wanted to, but we can make it look so much better by adding another colour over the top. I really like black because I've got the little bit of black in here. I chose the black. Then I'm choosing this beautiful fabric. This is one of Tulip Pink's fabrics, which I've always loved, and I love cutting it on the bias because it really comes out beautifully. So this is for the 3/8 of an inch. Once again, the same, you're going to fold in and in till it meets. Then we'll press. It's just a little bit fiddlier on the smaller parts. Take your time. If it's not really even on this end, allow that to be a bit of waste. So once again, we'll do the same thing, up and back down. Now I'm not going to iron this whole strip. I've got another strip ironed up, but just to show you what we're doing, same thing. Use your fingers as a little bit of a guide to help it along. Don't push down with your iron, you're pushing through with the iron. Like, don't bog the iron down. You want the iron just to sit against the tool and glide it along. And just nurture it down there. And you end up with a perfect, perfect result. See that? And you can see how beautiful it turns out. Look at that cut on the bias. It's just wonderful. Love it. Don't be scared of stripes and you know, fabrics are a little bit off the norm. They look really fantastic. So as I said, I've got my strip made. So now we're just going to add this one, doing exactly the same. I'm going to lift this little tail bit up, so it's glued well down, and I'm going to start. Now this is where you can make a decision. Do you want to put it in the centre so you have a little bit of black showing each side? Do you want to put it right up against this inside edge or this outside edge? Let's see what we think looks good. We'll just take the end off. Now if I was to put it there, I think it blends into the weaving part too much. If I put it over here, that looks quite attractive. Or if I put it in the middle, you can see that I've got a really nice little edge either side, and that's the way I like to do it. But you make your decision. You might decide just with one strip. Once again, we're just going to put the little dots of glue all the way around till we get up to the top. Tuck it well in underneath. Now this is where you need a keen eye to be able to see that you're getting it even. If not, use a little ruler. I've got an 1/8 each side, and just use that little ruler. I find it's a handy little tool to help me get things lined up properly here. But remember, if you run off, pick it up and reposition. So you really can't get into trouble doing things like this. That's just my little guide as I go around. And just keep coming around. It takes no time at all. And like, people love when you do things like this because it looks fiddly, but I don't believe it's fiddly. I believe it's very enjoyable. It's very creative. Look how wonderful that fabric's coming out. These fabrics were just out of my scraps. Now just on this corner, just get it even around that corner. Okay, going good. So now we're just going to put the glue up there again. This is the best tool. The Taper's Tailored All. It helps me get things really, really neat. Fold it back again and press. Get it sitting there nicely, and then we keep going around. Then once we get this done, the next thing we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch this on. Now when I stitch this down, I'll just chat to you about that while I finish this last little bit off. When we stitch this down, I like to use the mono poly invisible thread in the top and in my bobbin because I've got a multicoloured fabric here. I don't want to use a white thread and it show up on the pink and the yellow and all of those. So the clear thread is my favourite choice. And I did use that clear thread in the bobbin when I did the quilting. So it's still in my bobbin. So that's what I'm going to use when I stitch this down. So there you go. So if you have any questions, just type in the questions into the comments box so that we can help you answer these questions. We love to help you out with that. Doesn't it come alive? Just really gives it a second, you know, a different dimension. I'm just going to run that off there. So there you go. There's our bias down. So I usually prepare all my blocks. I stand there and I make all my bias. I then glue it all on and then I can go to the machine, and it's very quick and easy to stitch around here once we show you how to set your machine up to get all of that really, really neat around this edge. So come with me to the sewing machine and we'll set it up. Remember, mono poly thread in the top and in the bobbin. Then I'm going to show you to use your open toe foot, and we're going to move the needle position over. So we're going to stitch right on the edge of this stripe on this side and on this side. We don't need to stitch down the edge of the black because that folded edge is right in underneath. So let's go to the sewing machine. Right, we're now at the sewing machine, but I just want to explain, as I did before, I've got the mono poly clear thread on the top of my machine and in the bobbin. Your choice of what you use. The other recommended thing that I love to use is this sew slip mat. So a lot of people will know about these. This just is the best thing because it's going to allow my fabric just to slide under the needle. So it's got the cutout for the feed dogs. It's got a sticky back on it. You lay it over the bed of the machine. Make sure you pat it down so that it grabs to the machine because you don't want it to move as you start to stitch because you'll sew through it and you'll wreck it. But just pat it down. Now once that's on there and I get my block under here and we want to start stitching this, it's going to allow this to move really freely under the needle. So it's not going to jerk on me and be a little bit difficult. So now we've got the open toe foot on the machine. Now that's the foot that has nothing in the front. I recommend using that foot because I want to be able to see the edge of the fabric. Now what we're going to do for that, I'm going to run the inside edge of the foot right against the outside edge of that thin bias strip. So put the pressure foot down. Now I'm going to move my needle position. Now most of our machines we can move the needle position. This is what's going to make it really, really easy for you to be right on the edge of that fabric and do really, really neat stitching. So I've got a button on the side of my machine. Oh, I just need to lift that pressure foot up a little bit. I'm just a bit off there. Now I'm going to move the needle over. You can hear it clicking across. I wait till I get it to where I want it. I want to go one more position to the right. Now I've got it just inside that inside edge of that thin piece of bias. So that's how I'm going to be able to stitch around there, and just keeping that foot right in against that edge. Now I'm not going to watch the needle, I'm going to watch the edge of the foot. And I'm going to sew all the way around the inside of this, get down to the bottom, and then I'll stitch around the outside edge, and I don't have to change the needle position. So now we're just going to watch the inside edge of that foot, as I said, and we're just going to take your time. If you need to slow your machine down to do this, do that. I've been some time stitching bias around, so I have my eye in at the edge, but you may, it's your first time, just go slow. Just whatever speed you need to go at. But I'm not watching the needle, I'm watching the edge of that foot. I'm keeping that edge of that foot right up inside against the edge of that bias. Now you can notice that it's sitting there beautifully because it's all glued down. If I was pinned this down, I would have had lots of movement, stopping, taking out pins. Take me a lot longer to do. Now we're coming up to that point, so I'm going to stop, and then we just pivot around. You may have to lift the pressure foot on your machine. I didn't have to. Stop and pick it up. You don't want your block to get caught on the edge of the machine, so just control that fabric under that needle. Just love using this open toe foot because it allows me to see that edge beautifully. There's other feet you can use, but this is my preferred foot. Threads here, I'm just going to cut them off so they don't get in the road. Now I'm getting down to the edge, so I'm just going to stop when I my needle down. I'll lift my pressure foot, so across the bottom edge to the side, lift the pressure foot. Then you notice I haven't had to shift the needle because now I'm coming back up on the side that the foot's going to sit right up against that edge, and we just keep sewing. Like sewing this on is the quickest part of making the whole block. We're up to that point again, so we're just going to stop with the needle right in that fold. You need to lift the pressure foot, and keep going. Now, if you follow these instructions, I think you'll have a master block made by the time you finish. And hopefully all the little hints and tips I've given you in this class is going to help you with a lot of other things you may be wanting to make. Big person in, I say all the time, there's no real rules, you've just got to find the way that works for you to get what you're working on completed. So I'm folding this little bit of the edge back here because I'm going to stitch in under it. Just hold it back, come down, come in there, and then just press your reverse button and finish off. A couple of little stitches. Done. So now we're going to go back to the cutting table because I have to talk to you about how we're going to join this together. Now when we join together and I start putting the sashings on, there'll be a lot of little hints and tips there for you, and you'll be able to use this technique to join any of your quilts together, quilt as you go. Okay, we've got the block completed now. Now, when I've already trimmed my blocks up, so I've made them rectangles. When I've done this one, I made them perfect squares because that suited this. You can do them whatever you want. There's nothing to say that has to be the same as what I've done. So I've had my block a little bit longer than what I have, a bit wider. So I use this 12.5 by 12.5 inch square ruler to get everything to size. So hopefully you've got one of those. It makes it easy. Now, to join these together, we're going to use my Quilt As You Go technique that I call between the block technique. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a piece of my backing fabric between these blocks. So there's my backing fabric. When I've joined this one together, I'm going to do the same on these two blocks. I've put a wider sashing here with a narrow one over the top. So we've got the backing strip that's here, and then we're going to put these two sashings over the top. Here is finished up 1 3/4, the purple, and the one on the top is 7/8. So remember, when we cut these sashing strips out, we're going to cut them out double the finished measurement. So double 1 3/4 and double 7/8. Now, because this is coming back to 1 3/4, when we cut our piece of fabric out for the backing, the strip here, we want it to finish up 1 3/4 when it's stitched in. So we have to allow for our 1/4 inch seam. So 1 3/4 with a 1/4 inch added each size is going to measure 2 1/4. So that's the measurement you'll cut this strip, 2 1/4 inches. If you've got my Quilt As You Go book, inside my book is a cutting chart for all of your measurements for the different size sashes. So refer to that, page 19 if you have that. So what we're going to do now, I've got my blocks basically the same size. We're just going to pin our spacer strip to this so the right sides of the backing are together. We're just going to, sometimes I leave a little bit of a hangover at each end so that I can align it up, but then I'll trim it. So we're just going to pin it, and I like to pin from the block, the right side up, so that I can keep an eye on everything here. Just pop some pins in, and we'll then stitch down with a 1/4 inch seam down this side. Then we're going to pull this out, and we're going to pin this one on and stitch a 1/4 inch down this side. Then we've put a spacer strip between the blocks that will measure the exact measurement that we want this to be is 1 3/4. So be accurate with your 1/4 inch seam. So I'm going to use that open toe foot on the machine, and I'm going to move my needle over, use my ruler to get my exact 1/4 inch seam. So let's go back to the sewing machine. All right, so now I want to sew a 1/4 inch seam. You could use your 1/4 inch foot, but I always use the open toe foot, and I put my little ruler under the foot, put my pressure foot down, make sure the edges are lined up. I just use something to make sure they're lined up and there's no little lip there. Then I move my needle position over to be the 1/4 inch that's on my ruler, because that's what I've used to cut everything out. So now I know all my 1/4 inches are the same. We've got our piece pinned on. So now all we have to do is sew down that side, then pin the other side. Now I've got my regular white sewing thread on the bobbin and the top of the machine, because now we're sewing a seam. So I don't recommend using the mono poly because it's not a strong thread. It's just very simple sewing at this stage. Keep the edge of the foot right against the edge of the fabric. And I'm going to pin the other piece on the other side. And then we're going to go back, as soon as I do that, we're going to go back to the cutting table, and we are going to then put our sashings on. Now just make sure that you've got, you can either trim this off at this stage, this little bit of extra, but what I usually do is just make sure they're lined up exactly, have the same amount of hangover at this end. Just check that, flip it over and pin this edge and sew down this side. So as soon as I do that, we'll go back to that cutting table and you're almost finished your project. Like when I get this finished, I'm just going to bind it like a normal binding. You can make more blocks, keep joining together like this. Make anything that you want. It's very, very easy technique. There's nothing hard about it. But this is just a little intro to Quilt As You Go, because a lot of people don't understand how we put our quilts together, Quilt As You Go, but this is exactly how we do it. Oops. Right, one seam left to go. Straight down. And I just leave this mat on my machine all the time because it just allows everything to slide through and it takes all the pressure off my shoulders. They're a wonderful, wonderful invention. Okay, now it's back to the cutting table. I'm just going to trim these ends just to tidy them up because I want everything level. The block should still be the same, but just cut that off. And come back to the other edge. Then we're going to use those two different size Sasher tools. Like you could fold the strips of fabric for this little short strip yourself, but get used to using the tools because when we join a big quilt together, they are really important to use. I'm just going to press this seam, so this seam's going to go into the spacer strip. Now that spacer strip should measure the measurement of your finished sashing. Flip it over and do the back. So make sure it's sitting there nice and neat. You know, when it's joined together, you're hardly going to see this spacer strip. But if you've got a lot of different fabrics in your stash, put all different fabrics on the back of each of your block and make all of these different colours. Then it makes a reversible project for you. So we should measure this, and I should get my exact measurement. Right, spot on 1 3/4. So now I've cut this strip of fabric 3.5 inches wide, and we're going to fold it in and into it meets. As I said, you could press that yourself, but get used to using the tools. I just find they make the result so perfect for you because the strip stays perfectly straight. We'll just get our little double fork pin, and then we'll just push with the iron. It's just a breeze. Let's get plenty of heat into it. Move it along. So that's plenty long enough. Now we'll make the next strip. That one's going to be 7/8, so I'm going to cut it 1 3/4, fold in and in. Put it in the 7/8 inch tool. This is exactly why I invented the Sasher tools, just to save time and to save myself burning my fingers. There's so many uses for them. Now, what I like to do next with this wider piece that's going to go down, I want to put a piece of my wadding inside this. So measure what this measurement is, and you're going to cut your wadding just a little bit narrower than what this piece is. Just cut it that little smidgen narrower. I'm going to open out this fold. And you can see the Sasher tool has given me a permanent crease, so I'm not going to lose this. If I make my wadding from this crease line to this crease line, it will make my sashing go off skew when I put it back in and iron it. So I like it that little bit narrower. When I fold over and fold over, it fits right to the crease It'll allow for that little bit of extra bulk. Then using the Hobbs Elam double-sided fusible batting, this is why I love it, because I can iron this in and it's not going to move anywhere. You possibly find if you use other battings, it could stretch when you stitch your sashing down. It can cause you a lot of different challenges, where this one I don't have any challenges. I just press it in there. Now we don't need to put it in this top piece, I only put it in the bottom piece. A lot of people say to me, why do I not put the wadding or the batting inside here? I find if I do that and then put the sashing over the top, it dips it down. So this is where we need to put it inside of here. I'm going to grab our glue. We're just going to put the glue right on the stitching line. And then we're going to lay our first sashing strip on top of that. Lining it the edge of the sashing right up with your stitching line, just so it's sitting on top of it. And then I'm going to press this side with the hot iron, and I'll just use the side of the iron, call it the heel I think, just right up against this edge of that, because I want that glue to sit that right on that seam. Then do this side. Just pull it out a little bit. You don't want that little spacer strip underneath to suck back in and cause a little pleat in there. Just keep a little bit of pressure on it. You're not going to see the stitching line. Just press it really, really neat. So there it is. Just snip off this end. How good it looks. See why I love this fabric. Now we're going to lay this one in the middle, and you can use that little ruler to get your measurements accurate if you need to. Just grab your glue, run your glue underneath on both sides, then we'll press that. Then all you have to do to finish this off is go back to your machine, put your needle in that position that I showed you for stitching your bias down. Use your clear monopoly thread on the top of the bobbin, and you're going to now stitch all edges. You're going to stitch this edge and this edge and then this edge and this edge. I can see I haven't got these centered properly, so I can take that off. And I can reposition it so I centre it perfectly. That's why I love the glue. Okay, so they're just a few of the little hints and tips that I use for myself, passing on to you, so I hope it helps you make anything that you want. Just once you stitch this on, trim it all back to the edges where you need it to be, put your binding around it, add more blocks. If I was doing another row of blocks to this now, I would trim these edges off, which I normally do with a rotary cutter, but so this is just a little piece. I would now join another spacer strip in here. Remember, that's this backing piece. I join that across here to the next row of blocks, and then I put the sashay across there, and I just keep working down till I get my project to the size I want. So I hope you've really enjoyed this lesson. I don't think I need to stitch this down. I think you're all clever enough that you're going to be able to do that. But remember, we'd love to see photos of your finished project. So till next time, please check out our website, www.pqw.com.au. Go to our YouTube channel, put any questions up that you want in the comments section. There is a kit available for all the tools that I've used, so have a look at the links that are in with this video, and click on the link and that will take you to the kits, or all the individual items that I use, because I'm a person that loves to use the tools to make my project come out perfect. So we'll say bye for now. Bye.